Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Whidbey Island. Whether this is your first time here or your 200th time here, you are welcome. And whether you come in with a broken heart, sounds like I don't have sound. Whether you come here with a broken heart or one that is so full of joy it's bursting, I hope you will find something that you need here this morning. Welcome. And welcome to you on Zoom. We know you're out there. We can't see you, but we know you're there. I thank everyone who helped make this morning possible. It takes a village. Whether you were the people who set up the chairs, printed the orders of service, greeted us at the front table, whether you played gorgeous music, made coffee, it takes everyone. And our tech people, it takes everyone to make a morning service possible, and you can help. Maybe just once every 6 weeks, there's an opportunity to sign up for all the various tasks in the foyer, and I really encourage you to do it. It helps you to be part and feel like you really own this place, because you do. And I thank the native peoples who so lovingly attended this land for generations. The Snohomish tribes on the south end of the island, the Skagit, Swinomish, and Samish on the north end. Our ancestors stole this land, and they considered it their right at the time. They were the victors. But we hold different values and different awareness now, and we recognize the genocide and the destruction that was perpetrated. So the question now is, how can I make a difference? How can we make a difference? What can we do to begin reparations? Our Native Connections leaders have lots of suggestions for us. Please read their newsletter and their entry in the Friday e-News. That's how we can make a difference. Our affirmation starts with the words, "Love is the spirit of this congregation." And we've been blessed over these many weeks by guests exploring what that love means in spirit and action. Barbara Wells Tenhove talked about love in action when she shared the story of her father who marched at Selma, and how that forever changed her family and her own life and her life trajectory. Kurt Holting described love in action when he shared the story of his sojourn to Ukraine to lead meditation in Kyiv. Last week, our Reverend Zachary told the story of how so many of our privileges and opportunities, ones we enjoy today and perhaps take for granted, are built upon the loving sacrifices of our ancestors. And this week, we're honored to have the Reverend Erica Hewitt explore how love defined the foundations of our faith tradition and how complex, both rewarding and pain-giving, love can be today. She's the Minister of Worship for the Unitarian Universalist Association, the author of 3 books, and the creator of a 12-part video series called Worship for Transformation that our worship team studied last year. What we learned is immeasurable. Reverend Hewitt lives in Maine, but has family in Seattle. So we are lucky to have her visiting us the second time in person this year. Thank you, Reverend Hewitt. It's a joy to have you with us in person. So please now, take a deep breath, center yourself, and let us create worship together.
Thank you. Good morning. Before we light our chalice, the symbol of our faith and the gateway into the time of meaning making, today's service is grounded in two texts. They are like North Stars, twin North Stars, a point toward which we journey without ever needing to arrive. They're simply a guide. The first text is by the late Bell Hooks, a Black author and social activist. The text from Bell Hooks is, spiritual life is first and foremost about commitment to a way of thinking and behaving that honors principles of interbeing and interconnectedness. Sometimes it helps absorb the message in a different way if you read it as well as hear it, so that's on your screen. The second guiding text is from David Rico, a white psychotherapist with Buddhist leanings. He says, love works automatically at times, but mostly it works because we work on it. Whatever does not work requires work. Since every adult has things to work on, refusal to work is the equivalent of reluctance to relate as an adult. Yeah, these texts might draw responses from you. That too is a map forward. They also invite questions that we might hold throughout worship or perhaps for the week. Your answers today might be different than your answers tomorrow or next month. So the next time you notice that you're struggling or celebrating a relationship, these questions might be helpful. In which of my relationships do I most readily honor interconnectedness? And in which of my relationships do I feel reluctance or resentment about doing the work of maintaining love? So I invite those questions to be moving among us and within us as we move forward into this time of worship and as we light our chalice.
The word courage comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. Poet Mark Nepo suggests that the original use of the word courage meant to stand by one's core, a striking concept that reinforces the belief that living from the center is what enables us to face whatever life has to offer.
To encourage means to hearten, to impart strength and confidence. And this is our work as a beloved community, a religious community, to encourage one another, to be bold in engaging the world around us, as well as our inner fears, and to deepen our capacity to love as fully as possible. Would you please speak the words in your order of service or on the screen as Tara lights our chalice? With full hearts, we claim our relationship to one another. We celebrate our collective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous. We light this chalice, symbol of our capacity to love and of the love that's made visible through our actions.
So I invite you to rise in body or in spirit, and we'll speak together our affirmation. Then stay seated for our first hymn, which is 1007.
Yes, the closing hymn slides will actually be in German. So there is a river flowing through each of us, a river of mystery and marvels. We carry so much inside of us. There's also a powerful force between us as members of the human family, and especially as Unitarian Universalists. Your lives here on Whidbey Islands or on the islands and on the Pacific coast revolve around the Salish Sea. I live on the coast of Maine, the opposite side of the country, where powerful tidal rivers snake their way inland from the Atlantic. Our house is within sight of the mighty Kennebec River, named by its ancestral people, the Abenaki, who first fished its waters and lived on its shores. 2 miles from our house, on the river's way to the ocean, the Kennebec jogs in a squared-off S shape, an extreme double curve that at night or in fog is treacherous for the many ships that need to sail their way upriver. And because of how treacherous it is, one lighthouse is not enough to orient ships to safety. And so in 1895, twin lighthouses were installed, the doubling point range lights. And as the name suggests, and as you can see somewhat, there are 2 lights. So if you are a ship seeking safe passage through the sharp curve of the river, you steer your course so that the 2 flashing lights align, one behind the other. Yeah, the lighthouses serve their function only in conjunction as a pair. The alignment of the 2 range lights, their relationship, is what guides ships away from danger. The activist Megan Swoboda observes, our survival depends on the relationships we build. This is because our collective power has a larger impact than any of us can have alone. For me, the truth that our survival depends on the relationships we build is also because leading a solitary life, or an isolated one, can be as treacherous as navigating in the fog. Our need for one another is mutual. Each of us needs people to call us back when we are headed toward a disastrous course or even a benign detour. And all of us need people who will remind us of our worth and of our values and our potential. So as many of you know, the defining characteristic of Unitarian Universalism is not just our reliance on one another, our interdependence. It's our promises to care for one another because of that interbeing. It's the if-then, if this is true, then this has to be true. If we are all connected, then we need to care for one another. And that covenant, that's our word for it, is part of our origin story. Our religious ancestors talked about taking care of one another and loving one another, but they did more than talk. They codified it, they formalized it, they sanctified it. So that story goes like this. In 1637, almost 400 years ago, the white settlers in what would become the town of Dedham, Massachusetts, wanted to start a church. They were Puritans. They had followed the Pilgrims across the Atlantic. not to escape religious dogma back in England. That's a myth. It was not about the content of belief, but in rejection of the church's tight hierarchical control over churches and their people. So to use fancy language, if you're into $20 words, the Puritans' beef with their church back home was not theological, it was ecclesiastical. Yeah, so ecclesiology, it comes from the Greek word ecclesia, Greek word ecclesia. It means congregation or assembly, which has to do with governance, leadership, membership, and how people of faith organize themselves. So the Puritans, in coming here, and again, we are descended from them in this important way, the Puritans did not want to be free of doctrine. They were motivated by their longing to be connected. They wanted the freedom to make promises that mattered, to love and care for one another well enough to serve God, and to hold one another accountable to those promises. So, just about a decade later, after talking and expressing these longings and figuring out what they could do, these separate churches of the people, the ecclesia, defined themselves in a document called the Cambridge Platform. This is not the actual 1648 document, but it's this small, and it's incredible to read. They declared in this, the communion of churches is exercised by way of mutual care in taking thoughts for one another's welfare. In other words, our 17th century ecclesiastical ancestors understood that our relationships our survival depends on the relationships we build. And therefore, they promised one another that they would make choices to uphold their beloved community and all the ones connected to it. There's this really funny story. This was still in operation years later. Henry David Thoreau talks about the Monday travel. All of the ministers would travel to these different churches, and on Monday they would sort of all cross paths getting back to their original church. So this was well known for decades, for centuries throughout New England. The Reverend Alice Blair Wesley sums up the ground of our collective being in her reflections in this version by saying, as if summarizing both us and the 17th century Puritans, we have found that there is always more to learn about how love really works and could work in our lives and in the world. Now, most of you here and there on Zoom have chosen Unitarian Universalism. More accurately, you have chosen and claimed a people who've claimed you back. And as complicated as that can be, the dance of interdependence with a chosen community, I believe that as UUs, we have preemptively made another choice: to extend our promises of mutual care and concern to people who need us, regardless of their label. And that's what our Universalist ancestors taught us, right? And here's where our theology, our beliefs and values come in, where the beliefs meet the container of how we hold ourselves. Our interbeing, our interconnectedness does not have boundaries or borders. We don't tell ourselves that we're invested in the people who made it into our building today, or who are on Zoom today, or who call themselves UU, and we're just isolated and disconnected from everyone else. To put some artistic license on it, our Universalist theology says that ours is an abundant table of love and care and solidarity, and that those hungering for the shelter of love, the people at the margins, the people who are most struggling, most targeted, most fragile, the people navigating rocky, hazardous waterways in the fog, are why we light the beacon. That's what we're for. I believe that's what our institutions are for as UUs. Our calling is higher than taking care of UUs as a people among ourselves. Because, I mean, we are not Puritans. We're not living in the 17th century. We understand both our social privilege and the social landscape. We understand the stakes, and we're being asked to shape and express love in new ways. We are witnessing, as we knew we would, but we didn't quite know how. We're witnessing the rollout of a strategic campaign of chaos and cruelty. It is a deadly combination of malice, incompetence, and indifference. It is being perpetrated by design, with intention, the shredding of legal protections, the shredding of livelihoods, and the decimation of physical and the existential safety of many people, even though it may not be us. So I would argue that our covenant is not just to one another, Unitarian Universalist to Universalist. Because I'll remind you of how Alice Blair Wesley summarizes the foundation of our faith. We have found that there is always more to learn about love, how it really works and could work in our lives and in the world. So I ask you to, just for yourself, answer, where is that true for you? Just silently. In your heart or in your life, where is it true that there is something new to learn about how love could look? In this winter of cruelty, chaos, or loneliness, or pain, maybe yours, what are you learning about how love could work? Breathe with me. And then I invite you to sing with me these ancient words, ubi caritas. Words that remind us that the spirit of life is most present where love abounds. Ubi caritas. Ubi caritas. Keep singing. Take a breath with me. I want to turn to what each of us knows about love in our lives, in the private spheres that ripple out and intersect one by one with other people. In her book, All About Love, the late Bell Hooks writes, "The word love is most often defined as a noun, yet all the most astute theorists of love acknowledge that we should all love better if we used it as a verb." And throughout this book, Hook frames love as action, as practice. I like the word practice because it implies that we're not ever supposed to be perfect or be done with it, right? She says love is a combination of care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, and trust. But, she reminds us, the practice of love offers no place of safety. We risk loss, hurt, pain. We risk being acted upon by forces outside of our control. And you know this if you have opened your heart to anyone at all. There is no love without risk. Relationships are hard. Newsflash. People are not loving and loyal all of the time. That last truth is offered by David Rico in his book, The 5 Things We Cannot Change. And he elaborates on that statement, that people are not loving and loyal all of the time. Just in case we haven't, experienced the truth of that, he elaborates, sometimes people keep their promises, and sometimes they do not. Sometimes people love us loyally and faithfully, even unconditionally. Sometimes they hate, reject, abandon, or betray us. Now, I'm a truth teller. So for me, it feels liberating to name those truths out loud. They remind me that when I feel vulnerable or unloved, or if I struggle to maintain love and loyalty toward others, it doesn't mean I'm unlovable, doesn't mean I'm less than whole. It means I'm human, and so are you. Telling these truths that relationships can be hard and require work from us is also empowering. I think it's a gift to remember that in many of our relationships, not all, but in many of our relationships, we have choices about how to name boundaries and expectations, even if we're just doing it privately for ourselves. We often have choices about where to compromise, choices about when to forgive, and about what to work on. So the practice of loving, despite not having a perfect track record, means choosing when to risk our tender hearts and doing it. As David Rico put it in our guiding text, love works automatically at times, right? It's especially easy with animals, with pets. That's the automatic part for me, right? But mostly love works because we work on it. Whatever does not work requires work. And since every adult, again, listen, there's no shame here, right? No shame. It's like saying every adult needs to breathe. Every adult has things to work on. Refusal to do the work is the equivalent of reluctance to relate as an adult. Oof. Now, I would put an asterisk on that. If love is a practice, then that practice also includes deciding when to remove ourselves from relationships. Yeah? Because of abuse, or because of someone's refusal to put love into action, or someone's ongoing inability to let us have our peace and our sense of self, right? These truths about love, love as action, love as work it requires, love as the choice that we get to make whether to keep investing, invite us to claim our agency. And this is also a gift of Unitarian Universalist theology. As a people, most of us, I can never speak for every single you, but in general, we don't believe that there's a great decider in the sky who is pulling levers, right? And pushing buttons to quote unquote teach us lessons, right? Or steer our course. I will say this is my belief. No one has to believe the same things in this space. But for me, the sentiment, everything happens for a reason, it's nice to put on a coffee mug, but it does not bear up under thoughtful, responsible scrutiny about what most of us say we believe. We who are UUs rely on our inherent wholeness and our capacity to learn and grow to meet life's randomness. It takes my breath away, honestly, this glorious mystery among many glorious mysteries, that despite having been hurt and causing hurt over and over, we have the capacity to turn back toward connection and back toward compassion. And so I'll name once more the questions I offered at the beginning of the service. You get to take these questions with you or let them go. In which of my relationships do I most easily honor interconnectedness? In which of my relationships do I feel reluctant or resentful about doing the work of love? You are probably carrying a story within you. I would not blame you if, as I spoke, maybe about some of the harsher aspects of the realities of love, if certain people came to mind. Like, that's what happens. So you are probably carrying one or more stories within you about love's power, or about the challenge of how difficult love and relationships can be. If one of those stories is about struggle, or fear, or loss, it's an awfully big ask to suggest that you let it go. So I instead am inviting you in the coming moments to set it down, or to loosen your fist around that story just for this time together. Here at the front of the sanctuary, there is a bowl of water, a bowl of salt, and flower petals. There is the same in the back. If you're on Zoom, I'm going to first invite you to do something. If any of you decide that you like this better, do what I'm about to suggest, and then I'll tell you what the other option is. I invite you to sit quietly and imagine, with palms upturned, that one hand has coarse salt in it. And imagine what it feels like to squeeze the sharp grains, to maybe hear them crunch, to imagine the saltiness it will leave on your hands. The imaginary salt that you hold and squeeze with all of your senses is a reminder of tears that we have shed. because of loss or betrayal or mistakes. But in your other empty hand, imagine a handful of fragrant, beautiful flower petals. Imagine how soft and supple they are, silky. Imagine the color. And as you rub them in your fingers, imagine releasing a beautiful scent. And these flower petals that you're experiencing with your four senses, let's say, don't eat them unless they're edible flowers, in your imagination, is about beauty. The beauty of love and our gratitude for how love has shown up in our lives. Now, if you're in the space, and if you'd like to share in the ritual, Joy is going to play for as long as we need. There's no urgency. There's no special order. You may find your way to a bowl of water and put in salt to set down any sadness, bitterness, pain, and or you may toss in some flower petals as a reminder that love has enriched and blessed your life. Just be mindful of your neighbor. Feel free to come forward, or if you want more privacy, go to the back. This time belongs to you. You cannot mess this up. We bear witness to the stories contained in these two bowls and to all of the ways that you have learned about the power and the fragility and the patience and the work of love. These flower petals and the water from both bowls are going to be given back to the earth after the service. So part of those stories will linger on this beautiful space. Come with me into a time of connecting with your own deep wisdom. And as you breathe, take a moment to acknowledge and celebrate that you are here as a whole person with a tender heart. Sweet mystery, present in earth and sky and sea. We give thanks for the impulse of life, for the ways that life flourishes with ease. In the form of love, you are the holy spark of connection. Where there is love, there you are, there we are. We are imperfect at giving love and sometimes at receiving it. Some of us are very, very scared because there are members of our human family, especially those in power, who seem to relish destroying that holy spark. That power to diminish and destroy is not the only power that matters. It is not the power we welcome here among us and within us. Here, we choose to do the work of maintaining love as we're able, knowing that it is a risk, knowing that we will be imperfect at it, but giving each other courage. Here, may we recommit ourselves to being beacons for one another, for taking turns when necessary. May we be beacons for the fearful, the exhausted, the lost, which is also one another. Help us rise to our fullest selves and our fullest capacities. And may we return to this place as often as we can to be reminded of those capacities. May it be so. Amen.
One way we express love in action with this community is through our dedicated offerings at least once a month. How many of you have experienced a power outage where you didn't have running water? It happens more often on the island than it does in the city where they have backup for power outages. So, no running water, nothing to boil for tea, nothing to wash the dishes that you forgot to do the night before. You certainly can't wash your hands and your face. Nothing for drinking other than that what you might have stored. Nothing to flush the toilet. You know, for a few hours, it's probably no big deal, kind of an adventure, right? But for week after week, it becomes a nightmare. We take water so much for granted, except when we don't have it. Ryan's House, our beloved haven for homeless youth, lost their well a couple weeks ago. They are trucking in water for washing and drinking, but they desperately need a new well dug. And the price tag is beyond their savings. So a call has been made to the wider community. Some of you may have seen it, saying, help. Today is the opportunity for us to do our little bit to help. So please give generously as Joy gifts us more music.
Recording in progress.
So I invite you to rise again in body or spirit and join in singing just as long as I have breath. The words of David Rico again. What makes us human beings so uniquely wonderful in this puzzling universe is that we never give up on love.
Against all odds, with no guarantee of being loved in return, out of the hate and hurt so often handed us, in the face of the sad suffering of history, we go on loving.
What deep respect we're worthy of for this capacity of ours to make love out of anything and to let it last.
Go trusting your strong, sturdy, tender heart, its knowledge, its wisdom about love, being willing to open it over and over, to care for yourself and love yourself too as a gift. Go in peace.